Hi, everyone. Get started in maybe a minute or so. Good, Justin's there. It's all working. All right. Okay, well, I think I will get started. Welcome to the event. I'm really happy to have Justin here today. My name is Amanda Beekle. I'm the Ontario Important Bird and Biodiversity Area Coordinator at Birds Canada, and I will be your host today at the webinar. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. So we have all of you attendees muted and the videos turned off just to minimize any background noise or interference while Justin's giving his presentation. And we are going to hold all the questions until after Justin's presentation, but feel free to put them in the Q&A during the presentation, and then we'll just go in order at the end. So if you want to also chat between yourselves or ask me a question, you can do that in the chat or the Q&A as well. And then today's event is being recorded. It's also on Facebook Live, so hi to people that are on Facebook Live right now. It'll be on Facebook for about a day, and then we are going to move it onto the YouTube channel that anyone who's registered for Birds on the Niagara for free can access. So if you're on Facebook Live, you can still register for that festival for free access to the recording after today. And I've posted a link in the Facebook chat. Everyone on the Zoom should be already registered. So there are lots of amazing talks this year. Another reason to register, there's owls, conservation in the Niagara region and conservation in general, some Indigenous stories and traditions, gardening for birds, and a live virtual sketching workshop, which is tomorrow at noon, and so much more. So yeah, check out registration if you haven't already. So now I'm going to introduce Justin and his talk. As some of you might know, the Niagara River is renowned for gull watching and has so many hotspots that attract birders from all over the place. The Niagara River Corridor IBA is actually estimated to see 25% of Bonaparte's gulls population passing through it every year, which can be around 100,000 birds. So Justin wants to tell us why we should care and why we want to watch gulls. He's going to be enthusiastic and he's going to get us interested in looking at gulls, and I'm excited to hear about that. So Justin, a little bit about him. He is Quest Nature Tours Director of Programs and Senior Naturalist. And he might talk a little bit more about Quest, but it's Canada's longest serving nature travel company, and they go to all 7 continents. And he's a lifelong birder who worked for several years as a senior naturalist at Ontario's world-renowned Algonquin Park. It's beautiful. And Justin is the past president of the Toronto Ornithological Club and a life member of OFO, which is Ontario Field Ornithologists. And he loves gulls and looks for them wherever he travels in the world. I personally think that gulls can be super challenging because of their different years and their different plumages, which is also part of the fun. So I'm super excited to hear what tips Justin has for ID and to hear his enthusiasm for gulls. So let's let Justin's soothing voice take us through this somewhat challenging but rewarding topic, and enjoy. Take it away, Justin.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Amanda. And I'm pleased to be invited back for my second presentation here at the Birds of Niagara. It was really fun speaking last year. And as Amanda said, I do love gulls. I love gulls a lot. And today's presentation really focuses on what we call an introduction to gull identification, moving beyond seagulls. Now, if you're maybe newer to gulls, just the idea that anyone would be interested and you might find that kind of odd or unusual, it's completely understandable. You could say that those who are really into gulls are a peculiar group of people. Every year, as Amanda said, well, the Niagara River Corridor is an area of major importance as an IBA for important bird area, particularly for gulls. A lot of people every winter will gather along the shores, along the banks of the Niagara River, such as here, just below the Canadian side of Niagara Falls, to look at gulls. And passersby may wonder, why are they looking at them? Because a gull is a gull. I mean, all gulls are seagulls. What could be so interesting to warrant that attention? And I think, in popular culture, gulls are just seagulls. They're generally considered, often considered a nuisance, not by me. Perhaps a bird you don't really want to have an encounter with. Understandably, gulls can seem threatening, perhaps, and they're in a group or a class of their own. And I understand it. I have had this conversation. And this was a glaucous wing gull that I met on Granville Island in Vancouver, British Columbia one year. A family member once said, gulls would be interesting if they weren't so annoying. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting comment. I find them interesting. But if you like to get more familiar with gulls, you may be aware. There are many different species of gulls that are found around the world, but when it comes to identifying gulls, they do pose a challenge. You might have accompanied someone going gulling, as they say, to a place like this, where supposedly, or you've been told, there's a number of different gull species to look at, and all you see is this wall of gulls, and they all look kind of the same. And then when you do get a chance to look at a gull, you've heard that there's this species or that species, and you look at one and it's not really clear what it is. It's just not clear, even if you have the bird in full view or in plain view. Maybe you're birding along the Niagara River and you see a distant patch of ice floating down the Niagara River, such as this one here, and the gulls are kind of far. They're all sort of dark, muddy looking. They're hard to make out, and it's just, where do you start? Where do you start with that? And that's completely understandable. Now, for me, I love gulls. Gulls take center stage. If there's anything else, anything going on around, if I see the gull, our eyes meet, I'm just focused in on that gull. And I do think gulls are really, really attractive. They have a certain attitude about them, which I appreciate, which makes them fun to look at, I think. And there's a certain persistence that gulls have as well, like this glaucous-winged gull in Vancouver's Stanley Park that was intent and was going to succeed in swallowing this ochre sunstar. It was going to do it. It wasn't going to let go. So they're really interesting. They seem to have personality. They seem to have intent, like this California gull here, and they're beautiful, and they're more diverse than I think many people appreciate, which is why I like them. I look for gulls wherever I go. This is a beautiful lava gull in the Galapagos, just stunning, really, when you look at it. Very subtle but beautiful. And as you start to look at gulls, if I can convince you at some point, if you're not yet convinced, I think you will become enraptured with them, because they're just interesting birds to look at. Visually, they're very, very interesting, and they do have that spunk and that personality, and they're noisy and gregarious, and there's always something going on in their little gull societies, which I think make them fascinating. And I think really fundamentally for me, I don't know really what captured my imagination with them, but I just find gulls haunting. When you look at them, you look at their eyes, and they kind of possess you. They take you in, and there just seems to be more to them than meets the eye. They're not just a bird. They're somehow they seem possessed of some greater intelligence, and I think that's what makes them interesting to look at. Now, I understandably, in terms of identification, there are lots of challenges that are gulls. You might have heard that gulls are a hard group to identify. Maybe you're just looking for a reason to just be interested in them at all. Now, for myself, I've been into birds since I was 5 years old. I just used to read, I used to look at bird field guides and just look at them and study them intently. And I guess I sort of learned to identify gulls initially by just the feel of them, how they look. I just sort of look at a gull like this gull here, which is a herring gull. And I guess I sort of knew it was a herring gull based on various things visually and the circumstances, but I never really thought about intently, like, how do I know that's a herring gull, and how would I get started in gulls, until I came across this book, which I'm going to show you here. And I'll bring it up later. It's a fantastic book that really made things clear to me in a different way. It's called Identify Yourself, the 50 Most Common Birding Identification Challenges by the late Bill Thompson III. Now, this book is out of print now. You can probably still find it used. It's a fantastic book, not only for gulls, but many other things. And it had a couple of chapters. It has a couple of chapters focusing on gulls. And I read them. I thought, bingo, this is great. It presented a system to learn to identify gulls. And really, when you get into gulls, if you've ever stared out at a group of gulls, what are they? Where do I start? And maybe you look through a field guide and you just see, the couple of dozen species of gull across North America, and wow, what am I going to do? What system do I have? Well, this book makes it some things very, very straightforward, really. Before you even get into gulls, there's just a few things that you have to accept. Now, I didn't invent these statements that we're going to look at more closely. I just love them, and I encourage you to find this book that I have noted here below, if you can find it and get your hands on a copy. But a few very basic things. They sound so simple, and they really are. And you just have to accept them. A few things to accept. Number one, gulls are highly variable. We don't try to understand that, just accept that. And they're variable in different ways. For example, these are a group of gulls in St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada's easternmost province. In the winter, these are all of a species called Iceland gull. These are all Iceland gulls. And here I'm focusing on the second bird from the front. Just have a look at it. It seems quite white on its breast, and on its forehead, a little bit of gray here behind. Now, the bird in the foreground that I'm going to focus on now is also an Iceland gull. Now, it has a lot more gray on the front, a lot more gray all over the head, just much more uniform and widespread gray over the front part of the bird. It's the same species. Now, when you think of a cardinal that you might have coming to your feet, or a male cardinal number one, a male cardinal number two, they, at first glance, they really look identical. Now, there may be finer differences, but they're harder to see. In gulls, you can have much more apparent variability, the same species, same age, whatever it is, and that's just the way it is. So within one species, there's a lot of variability. There's also variability in terms of the time of year you're looking at birds, at the gulls. This here is an adult ring-billed gull. I photographed it, I think, in the month of February in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Just look at the bird. You'll see it has a lot of gray speckling on the head, which is normal for this species in the winter. Later, birds are undergoing molt. I'll talk more about molt in a little bit, but this could be the same bird, and it has just a couple specks of gray remaining. It has undergone molt. It is molting, and the head looks all white. Same species. They're both adults. It just changed somewhat with the season, and this varies from species to species. And other subtler differences, differences in plumage. This is an adult California gull that I photographed in Alberta, Canada, in the month of June. And if you look at it, look at the gray part on the bird, looks very worn and tattered. Look at the wingtips. You see essentially black wingtips with tiny, tiny specks of white. There's like 3 specks of white on those tips. The same bird, this bird will molt sometime, in July, August, and in late August, that bird could look like this. Look at the gray on it. It's very fresh and clean. It doesn't look all tattered and worn. If you look at those black wingtips, you'll see large white triangles on them, what we call apical spots. And that's just a difference in the time of year, because this bird is molted also in a more substantial way. So they're variable that way. And sometimes there's variability that you can't explain. These are both lesser black-backed gulls in Senegal, in the westernmost part of Africa. I photographed these in November of 2018. Look at their leg colors. Look at the bird on the right. It has two different colored legs. One is like a dull yellowish gray, and the left leg is very intensely orangey yellow. I have no idea what's going on with this bird, and I won't try to understand it necessarily, but it's a lesser black-backed gull. And the bird on the left is also different looking, also an adult, and it looks different. And now you can see the differences actually. If you look at the two, even the heads and the darkness around the eye, they're both the same species, they're both adults, and that's just the way it is. So this brings us to sort of number two as well. Gulls vary with age also, sometimes tremendously, even much more than within one age group. Adults can be variable, one adult to the next, but this is where things get challenging with gulls, and I think may have put you off in the past. They vary with age. Here are two ring-billed gulls, and if the bird on the right weren't feeding, if I hadn't seen it feed the bird on the left, put food in its bill, in its mouth, you might have assumed they're two different species entirely, but they're both ring-billed gulls. The adult on the right, very different from the bird on the left. That's just a fact. And number three, rare gulls are rare, which should seem obvious, right? If you say something's rare, it's rare. But in terms of gulls, when we say rare, we mean they're usually really rare. So you can go to a place where you see like 200 gulls in front of you, and the likelihood that there's a rare gull in that group is very small. And this is actually, that might sound, if you're looking for rare gulls, like you want to see new species, it's kind of, and if you want to build your skill in identifying gulls, it's actually kind of comforting. I'll tell you why. I hope to show you that. I mean, in terms of the gulls we might see in the Niagara River corridor, and also more generally in Ontario, New York, northeastern North America. I mean, these are the gulls pretty much that you can expect to see. All of these gulls have been seen in the Niagara River corridor, but it seems like a lot. Many of them are similar in appearance to others, but the fact is, really, it's the first four here that are the most likely, the ones in yellow, that you're most likely to see just in terms of absolute numbers and abundance and in regularity. Number one, herring gull, ring-billed gull, Bonaparte's gull, and great black-backed gull. More or less in that order of decreasing abundance in the wintertime. The other gulls from 5 through 17, I mean, they're becoming increasingly rare, roughly in that order. What that means is that when you're looking at a group of gulls like this right here, this photograph I took along the Niagara River Parkway on the Ontario side in December one year, and there's not much variety in this group. You'll see, you look at the birds, look at the different shades of brown and gray, and you see obviously a lot of white and slaty, like a blackish colors on them. There isn't much variety here. And the other thing, even if you're not watching, like I showed you that list, which I said was sort of specific to Ontario and the Niagara River, New York State, wherever you are, the comforting thing is you'll have some more abundant gulls of some kind or another, and this varies regionally. So last summer, I happened to be in the Northeast, in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, in the Magdalen Islands, and I photographed this little fishing boat here being followed by a huge group of gulls, and I found it very striking. Now, it's sort of hard to see, but if you look at this image, you'll see a lot of birds have very dark mantles here on top of the wings, what we call a mantle of the gull. And a lot of them are great black-backed gulls. Now, great black-backed gulls aren't that abundant really in Ontario. I mean, they're they're number 4 on that list that I showed you. But over here, they are the majority of the gulls, a slight majority, like 50%, 60% of the gulls, at least in this group, are great black-backed gulls. I'm not used to thinking of them that way because I live in Ontario. But in this region, they are the main gull, followed by herring gulls, You need a bit of an adjustment, but the point is you have some very common gull where you are, if you have any gulls at all, and some somewhat less common, and then rarer and rarer. So it's really about getting adjusted to what's the most common thing in your area. So those are the few things you have to accept about gulls, which is good. Now, the same book, Identify Yourself, also presents some shortcuts, which are fantastic really to think about, to be aware of, is that when you're going to be looking at a group of gulls or going out gulling or just trying to become familiar with them, there's basically three sizes of gull, what we call large gull, medium gull, and small gull. It's really a no-brainer. But what you can do here is, it'll become important as I talk more about the appearances of gulls, the plumages, is basically they fit in these categories. All the gulls can more or less fit into these categories. Number one, the large gulls. Of the first four gulls that I showed you, herring gull is a large gull, great black-backed gull is a large gull as well. Great black-backed gull is larger than a herring gull, but both of them sort of functionally fit into the large gull category. In terms of medium-sized gull, ring-billed gull, very common gull, will fit into that category, and small will be the Bonaparte's gull. And I'm going to show you these gulls in a moment. Herring gull, this is an adult herring gull. It's a fairly large bird. Size is relative, though, sometimes, especially if you look in an image, but I'll show you some tricks for figuring out if a gull is a large or medium or small gull. But this is basically a herring gull adult. Gray, it has a gray mantle, yellow bill with that red spot underneath the bill. It has a clear eye, and it has a nice orangey yellow eye ring. That's the skin around the eye. And in winter, it'll have some amount of gray on it. And as an adult, it has pink legs. You've probably seen herring gulls if you've been out intently looking for gulls. Certainly on the Niagara River, it is abundant in the winter. The ring-billed gull is a medium-sized gull. This is a very common gull, especially in the summer in the Northeast, throughout, in fact, large part of North America. It's your typical McDonald's parking lot gull waiting for fries. This is an adult. It has essentially the same shade of gray on the back as the herring gull, somewhat smaller. It has a nice carmine red eye ring, the skin around the eye, clear eye, yellow legs, yellow bill with a black ring around the tip of the bill. It does not have a red dot there. And then the small size gull that I mentioned in the Niagara region, especially, Bonaparte's gull. This is one in winter plumage. In breeding plumage, an adult will have a black head. And this is a really cool gull. This is a gull that nests in trees in the boreal forest from basically Quebec across the west into Alaska. It nests in coniferous trees, and then it comes winters on the coasts of western and eastern North America, and a huge number, as Amanda mentioned earlier, 100,000 will be spending some time on the Niagara River, and when it becomes very cold later, kind of midwinter, a lot of them will disperse to the east coast. But it's a small gull. Now, I'm saying large, medium, small. There are actual measures, like if you look in a field guide, they'll tell you how big these gulls are, but that's not something you necessarily remember. The good thing about gulls is this is important. The sizes are important. How would you know if a gull is large, medium, or small? Because size can be relative, especially with distance, but often there is a frame of reference that's already there when you're looking at the birds in the field. For example, gulls are gregarious. They often hang out with other gulls and with other birds, and they sit put very often. So you can have scale to help you decide if is that bird a small gull or medium gull, large gull. And important if you don't actually know the identification, like know the ID of that gull yet. This is a Bonaparte's gull sitting on a dock with mallards. Mallards, yeah, they're about, let's say the body's about that big. So if I see it in smaller than a mallard, that's a small gull. So this is how you can tell. One of the cues you can use for your environment to tell you. The next bird here, take a look at that. This is a gull on the right. In the back, you have a double-crested cormorant, which is farther away. So you expect it'll look smaller than the gull. If you moved it up a little bit, it might look a little bit bigger. But the fact is, this gull is huge. I'm sure is larger in bulk and mass than the cormorant behind it. it is a large gull, and I can tell that. I can probably see it once I get used to looking at gulls. It's just big, but here I have that frame of reference. This is a great black-backed gull, which is the largest gull species in the world, and it looks bigger than many other birds it'll be near. Certainly it'll look larger than any other gull you're going to see. So even if there's only a slight difference, but it should appear imposing. So you have that frame of reference provided to you. Now, the other shortcut is that gulls start out in terms of age, they start out brown, and then as they age, they turn gray or black and white. So when they're young, when they fledge, they leave the nest, they're basically brown, and as they age, as they molt, they'll transform in appearance. Part of their body will become white, the head typically, and typically the body, and the upper parts, the back, will become either gray or slaty, dark gray or blackish. That's basically what this means. So this is an adult herring gull once again. You see it's actually surrounded by ring-billed gulls, and you can see it's a bigger bird. So there's a large gull for you, and it's beside a carp on a beach here at Point Pelee National Park. This is what it looks like as an adult. In the springtime, immaculate white head and body, and gray on the back. But a few years prior, when it was in its first year of life, that herring gull would have looked more or less like this bird here, essentially a brown bird. So that's what that shortcut means. Now, I love looking at gulls to figure out their ages, and that's, I think, maybe the funnest part of gull watching for me. You may not consider it fun yet, but it's important. This is just, I found this somewhere on Twitter. I thought it was fantastic. That's me being thrown out of the window here. So gulls start out brown and they become white or gray or white or black. Now, there's this other book that I found that I love, and I have somewhere here in my office, and I'm going to show you this plate, which I copied from this book. Also, great book to have, out of print. But basically, this shows the progression in appearance, in overall appearance of a herring gull. And from upper left, and upper left is the youngest, basically the appearance of the youngest bird, which is a bird that's just fledged, called juvenile. And going from left to right and top to bottom, as that same bird ages, it'll molt over the seasons. In its first winter, it'll look paler on the head here, and then as it keeps molting and also wearing, as feathers wear, they become bleached. So that can also contribute to lightening of the bird. But over time, you see, overall, it becomes less dark. And as we go here to the adult at bottom right, it becomes the clearest bird. You see up here, the tail is very dark. It has this dark tail band. Eventually, it becomes all white. All the darkness on the back gets lost here on the mantle, and it becomes basically pale gray. The tail is white, the head is white, and there'll be some seasonal differences, as I said, even in an adult bird. But basically, that's the pattern that a bird will follow. And I mean, those changes happen. Some of the changes can happen fairly quickly. For example, this is a Franklin's gull that I photographed in November one year, and it has already lost a lot of brown. This is a bird in its first year. It would have had a lot of brown on the back, and it's molting. And already on the back, it has gray in what we call the scapular region here, which I'll show you with my pointer. And it has a lot of brown here that's on the wing coverts of the wing. The same bird a few months later, as it continues to age, it still has some of the brown feathers here, but it has a lot of new gray feathers coming in here to replace them. Note that the wingtips here are very brown. At a certain point, these will also be molted. They will be replaced with darker feathers, blacker feathers that have some degree of white tips on them here. As you can see, and see this bird here is still a younger bird, but has a lot more gray, and a lot of the brown is lost, and it's slowly transforming as it ages. Sometimes it's not obvious at a certain point that a bird is molting. But if you watch gulls long enough, you can see some of those big changes happening. A lot of the body feathers on a gull can be molted up to twice a year, essentially. So the changes on the body can happen fairly quickly. On the wings and the tail, wings and tail feathers, so the long feathers of the wing here, primaries here, and the secondaries, and the tail feathers here, what we call the rectrices, those are molted once a year. And gulls that are young typically have a very, a broad, more or less broad, dark brown band in the tail. Those feathers are dark brown, and they have a lot of brown here. And as those are replaced, you start to see changes. This is a ring-billed gull photographed at about 1 year of age, and it's getting very pale gray feathers here, replacing here, right here. They are replacing feathers that were very brown in this area here, and that these feathers here and these feathers here will be molted out and replaced, and the tail feathers here will also be lost. And so sometimes you see those changes going on very actively, very obviously in the birds, which can lend to some confusion, but that's okay. And other changes happen to gulls as well, in addition to the plumage as they're aging. Eye color can change, leg color can change, and bill color can also change. Young gulls, initially, they all have basically all dark bills. The bill is all dark, like on this glaucous-winged gull from the West Coast. And as the bird ages, it'll start to lose darkness from the base of the bill. Depending on the species, it can happen very fast or very slowly. They'll become more and more pink at the base. And as they age, also the tip of the bill, which was initially dark, also starts to show that it's a little bit pale, like right here. And it becomes paler from the tip in and from the base of the bill out. And the bill could change from pink to yellow. There's various changes that can happen, but essentially gull bills also become paler overall with time. So a lot of transformations are happening. That is essentially all these changes going on can contribute to those multiple appearances you can see, because once again, individuals of one age can also be at different stages of those transformations. So you can have birds of the same age that look different. So as I said, this is the book that the second title that I think is a great book to have on hand if you can find it. And it goes into some detail about the gulls. I told you earlier about the sizes of gulls, small, medium, and large. That is important because, as discussed in that book that I just showed you, it takes the birds, depending on their size, a different amount of time, a different number of years to reach a mature or adult appearance. So large gulls basically take 4 years. They have 4 more or less distinct appearances. Now there's transitions going on through as they age as well, but basically they have sort of 4 years to get to an adult appearance. And at any one time in a good gull watching location, you could see 4 distinctive appearances. Medium-sized gulls, like the ring-billed gull, take 3 years to reach the adult appearance or aspect. Small gulls, like the Bonaparte's gull, take 2 years. And at the bottom, I have these little notes: 2-year gull, 3-year gull, 4-year gull. Because of the length of time it takes to reach these adult appearances, these gulls get put into these different categories: 2-year, 3-year, 4-year. If you're looking at the National Geographic Guide, which is excellent, that's one of the things it'll say at the beginning of a species account. If I'm looking at, for example, the laughing gull, it'll say it's a 3-year gull. So automatically that means it'll take about 3 years to reach that adult appearance. What does that mean in the field? When I say at any one time, you could see these different appearances. Well, in the herring gull, for example, this is one of the best photos ever of gulls of different ages. These here, you have herring gulls, 4 different appearances, basically age appearance classes in the same frame, taken looking down into the Niagara Gorge. This is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph. It's amazing. And just look at this group of gulls right here. Can you guess, we'll come back to this image, can you guess which is the youngest, the bird here? What is the most brown bird? Then a bird that's in its, what we call second year, in this case we'll call it second winter, but basically a second year bird It looks mostly like the first year bird, the youngest bird, but it has a little bit of adult in it, a little bit of gray on the mantle. And I'm deliberately not pointing these out on the slide. The third year bird looks most like the adult. It has much reduced white or much reduced darkness on its tail, because it's with each successive molt, it's lost pigment in the tail. The new feathers have less dark pigment in them. It looks mostly like an adult, but it has a little bit of brown, still extensive brown and smudginess over it. And then the adult bird has the most clear gray across the mantle, all white tail, and it's basically the palest bird overall. Now, once a bird, now we call the herring gull a 4-year bird. When you see a bird that's, an adult, once it reaches the 4th year and beyond that, I mean, gulls can live to be, a herring gull can live to be 30 years old, probably 25, 30 years old. With every successive molt, because it's going to keep molting throughout its life, the body, more or less twice a year, and the wings and the tail, the long feathers of the wing and tail, the flight feathers as we call them, those will molt once a year. Beyond a certain point, it'll look essentially the same for the rest of its life. But up till that point, you can basically tell what age a gull is, first, second year, second or third year. There is some variability. For that reason, we sometimes prefer to say that a bird is a first year type bird or a second year type bird. But essentially, a first year herring gull, if we're going to go into detail here, the most brown bird, essentially a dark bill. You can have a little bit of paleness at the base here, starting essentially a dark eye, and dark brown wingtips, extensively dark brown on the tail. And if you're looking at a bird that's flying off, it's quite brown below. This one even shows a very dark bill as well. As it ages, it'll start to replace feathers on the top here it'll start to add feathers that are gray right here in the scapulars, but it's fairly limited just to that area. A whiter head. This bird is a second year bird. It still has quite a bit of darkness on the bill. Now here's another second year bird about the same time of year, a little bit later. It has starting to get a little bit more gray here. It has a much reduced darkness on the bill. As you can see, a lot of pale at the base, a little bit of pale starting at the tip, which is going to start working inwards towards the bird's head. And the eye, look at the eyes. This one's hard to see here, the first one, but our eye starts to get pale. The following year, it might look like this. It'll have more extensive gray, not only here on the scapulars and the back, but also down onto the wings, much reduced darkness in the tail, definitely clear eye, definitely a pale tip, and more extensively pale overall. Overall, it looks very much like an adult, but with some brown traces. And in flight, that bird might look like this. A lot of gray, obviously, on top, but still some traces of black away from the wingtips. This is where they should be on an adult. Black should be down here, but on a slightly younger bird, it has some darkness smudging up here. Still quite a bit of black on the bill, but a clear eye. And if you saw this bird fly overhead, stunning, right? It doesn't have a solid brown band across the tail. It has a white tail, essentially with sort of a broken band of black here. And in a year's time, this bird should have basically an all white tail, essentially. And this was lacking still the red dot on the base of the bill, which it will get as an adult, as in this bird right here. So you see those transformations are going on. And if I go back to this bird, you'll see it has very limited white on the wingtips, but with successive molts, eventually it should have larger white, like apical spots on the wing here. So very, very attractive birds, I think, just for that process. So if you come back to this image, you'll have, as I said, first year bird down here, it'll be bottom right. The second year bird will be this bird here, upper right. Mostly looks like the bottom right bird, but it has definitely some gray. It has molted its tail feathers once. It has a lot of darkness, but that darkness has gone from brown to black, and there's much more white in there. And the third year bird, mainly white tail, a few black smudges on the tail. It could be more than that, or it could be even less black than that, though, because of all the variability. And some smudging is a black beyond the wingtips here, and on the leading edge of the wing here. I see still some good black on the bill. This bird has that spot under here and much more gray, and that's the adult bird. Could be 4 years or older. So to keep it simple, medium-sized gulls, the ring-billed gull, medium gulls, ring-billed gulls, the prototype, first of all, very common gull, the prototype 3-year gull takes 3 years. A first-year bird might look like this. When it comes out of the nest initially, it has quite a bit more brown, but changes in smaller gulls take place more quickly. So more quickly within the first year, it's already getting a lot of gray here on the scapulars on the back. Dark eye, it doesn't have a yellow bill or yellow legs, they're basically pink, but it gets a pale base fairly quickly within the first year, and quite a bit of brown though all over the body. And this is another individual here showing that it's already getting a bit of a pale tip. It has pretty good gray here on the scapulars, a lot of brown speckling all over the body. Here's one kind of near an adult. Here's an adult at the back in the winter with a gray head. Here's a first-year bird. And if you were to see it in flight, this is a first-year bird at the bottom here with a fairly good brown band across, dark brown band all along the tail. A lot of brown underneath in the wing pits, as we call them. They're not armpits because birds don't have arms. They're wing pits. And below the wings, generally extensively dark brown tips here, and a lot of brown in the body. In a second year, a bird that's in the second year of life, it'll have much more gray across the wings here, not only on the scapulars here on the back, but also onto the wing. This bird has molted the tail feathers, of course. It has white tail feathers with some amount of black in them. The eye is still dark, but this is variable, and it has a bill that's starting to turn yellow here, but has kind of, it doesn't have a nice fine black ring around the bill. The legs are kind of yellowish, but they're not as vivid yellow, and it's more obvious when you see it next to an adult. And remember that gulls are often together, so you can see these differences in age much more easily. So a second-year bird on the left, look at the adult bird on the right, and how much more vivid it's what we call bare parts are, the legs and the bill, and the eye on the adult is pale. The eye on the second-year bird still is dusky. The bill is yellow, but not quite yellow, and that black ring is still fairly thick. So in flight, this is what it might look like. It doesn't seem to have any dark really under the wings. It has sort of this broken band of black on the tail. And here's one, a different view, a lot of kind of brown underneath the wings here, blackish, and a broken black band across the tail here, but it's definitely not a solid brown band or a almost continuous brown band like in the younger bird. And of course, the adult will look like this. So let's do a quick quiz. No, don't worry, you're not getting marked on this, but I'll just show you some birds, and you can just quickly decide. This is these are ring-billed gulls. All these are ring-billed gulls. Is this a first year, second year, or first year, second year, or an adult ring-billed gull? Let's see. I'm seeing an extensively white body, basically a white tail with a sort of discontinuous black band. So that's a second year ring-billed gull. Here's another ring-billed gull. I'm seeing a lot of brown in the tail. The body is quite pale. Now this bird was taken in the spring when the body's when it's undergone some additional molt on the body and on the head. Dark eye, a lot of brown, also brown underneath the wings here. This is a first-year bird. What about this one? I photographed this one actually just last week. This ring-billed gull, it looks like a lot of gray on the upper parts. If I look at the wing tips, I don't see really any traces of white apical spots, as we call them. Legs are yellow, bill is yellow, a very thick ring of black here, and a dusky eye. And so this would be a second-year bird. What about this one? Say that's look at the tail, mostly white, broken black band, a lot of gray with some smudging on it. That's a second-year bird. What about this one? This one's hard to see, but it definitely doesn't have a pale tip to the the bill. It's really a pink bill still, pinkish legs, a lot of brown underneath the wing pits. That's the first year. This one, a lot of brown. Pink bill, that's the first year. This one, let's see what you think. Just limited black in the tail, that's second year. And this one here, a little bit of pale on the tip of the bill, just a smudge, but essentially a pink bill with pink legs. Remember, the legs on this species will become yellow with age, but you see it, you see the tail very well. You see the wingtips, the primaries of the wings here, very, very brown, very extensive brown on the tail. That's a first year bird. So I hope you did well with that little warm up. But ring-billed gulls are fun to age and to look at because you can find them so commonly in parking lots. And quickly we'll look at small gulls, at 2-year gulls. And the prototype gull is the Bonaparte's gull, which is that small tree nesting gull that comes down in large numbers. It's a small, it's as a small gull, it takes basically 2 years to reach that overall adult appearance. Of course, once again, there's always variability. These here in this image are in flight here. These look to be all adults to me. If you look at it, an adult in non-breeding plumage, as I said, as an adult in breeding plumage in the summer, spring and summer as a blackhead, this is what it looks like. Extensively gray on the wings here, on the scapulars. In flight, essentially an all-white tail. The legs can vary from kind of pinkish to more orangey. Nice clear underwings here. Here's another adult here, nice white tail, white leading edge on the wing, which is a nice wedge, very attractive with black trim here. And a first year bird will have basically essentially a continuous black band across the tail, continuous black across the entire rear edge of the wing here, a little bit of smudging here, and a little bit of basically kind of brownish, blackish, not quite black on the front of the wing as well. So that's basically what a first year bird looks like. Now look at where, it's always important to look, if you see black on a gull, especially a small gull, look at where it is. If you see, do you see continuity in black across the whole back of the wing or not? For example, if you saw in the same location a gull like this, also very small, you see this bird does not have continuous black across the entire trailing edge of the wing like this one does. That's because this is the different species of gull. This is a little gull in its first year, which is the smallest gull in the world. So these were overall kind of this is really the basis for aging gulls and for understanding them, large, medium, small, 4-year, 3-year, and 2-year gulls. And I said, I gave some generalities about how those changes appear. The eye color gets lighter with age, bird gets overall gray with age, tails get overall white with age at a certain point. But there's variability. For example, some adult gulls, like this California gull here, which happens to also be wet because it's just taken a bath, it's perched beside some ring-billed gulls to the left. It has generally dark eyes as an adult. So just be aware, there is variability. If I'm looking at this group of gulls here, mostly they're ring-billed gulls. I think there's a herring gull in there for sure. As I said, adult gull wingtips, I mean, if they're going to be black, they're going to be black. The gull in the foreground here is an adult that has gray wingtips, and that's because it's an Iceland gull, highly variable gull species. Sometimes they can have black wingtips, but they can also be gray. So when you start to look at your common gulls, and get to know them well, you're going to start to see differences, and that's going to help you find rarer gulls. Some adult gulls, like this Glaucus gull, always has basically pure white wingtips. This is overall, otherwise, when you look at the bird, nice gray all over, pale eyes, typical adult Glaucus gull, white wingtips. And this gull here, this is an illustration, a tribute to Ontario's first record of black-tailed gull. This is an East Asian gull that, as an adult, look at this bird. Overall, it has a dark back, a dark mantle as an adult, but look at the tail, which you can see here. It has basically a black band in it as an adult. And the person who found this, Brandon Holden, he probably was, he's fine-tuned for these differences, looking at the common gulls. You've seen adult type of gull with a black tail band. There's something off with that in terms of the regular pattern of expected species and the progression of age of expected gulls that you have. So that can help you. These oddities can help you find rarities. So, as I said, I've been watching gulls for a long time, but I want to offer these words of encouragement. First you do have to go and look at gulls, but my point of encouraging you to do that is if you do that enough and you start looking at the gulls, looking at the ages, and figuring out, okay, this is first year, second year, third year of whatever that most common gull is that you have near you, you will be, I think, surprised at how quickly you notice gulls that are actually of a different species. And my little story here, just to show you that, which I didn't expect, honestly, I didn't expect. I went to St. John's, Newfoundland one winter in 2013 to look at gulls. It is the Iceland gull capital of North America in the winter. It has so many Iceland gulls, which are an Arctic breeding gull that are highly variable. Some have white wingtips, some have gray wingtips, some have more blackish wingtips. But this was a chance for me just to go and study Iceland gulls in large numbers, and I loved it. I was in really gull heaven. They're all around you. They're very close to you, so you don't even need binoculars to just look at them, and they're all around you. You can study all the variability. And this is the common gull in the winter in St. John's, Newfoundland. So it's sort of the frame of reference that you use to identify all of the gulls. Now, I'm saying that now, but I didn't realize this. So I'm studying Iceland gulls, first year birds, second year birds with pale tips. Here's a first year bird in front of me. This was an adult flying over. And I was in a park where there's a lot of Iceland gulls flying by, and this one bird flew by, and instantly I saw it, and I just said to myself out loud, there's a ring-billed gull. It's a ring-billed gull. And I didn't try to identify it as a ring-billed gull. It just was there, and I just knew it was a ring-billed gull. And because basically I spend most of my time of all gulls in Ontario looking at ring-billed gulls, and I'm fairly used to them, and they're just kind of imprinted on my mind. Now, ring-billed gull in the winter in St. John's, Newfoundland, is a rare bird. Now, there's always going to be a couple of them around, so it's not totally out of this world, but it's just not common numerically. There's very few of them. So, and my mind just identified it instantly, and there was the ring-billed gull. It's a guess what age? It's a first-year bird. And it just appeared to me, and I just was able to identify and recognize that it was clearly different without really trying. And I don't know what, and I just ascribe that to just looking at ring-billed gulls a lot where they're common. So really taking the time to study the gulls that you have that are most common, and you could go to gull watching hotspots like the Niagara River. If you happen to live in the Niagara River corridor, you are so lucky. But we all probably have gulls at some point in the season. So it's really worth looking at them if you have nothing to do, if there's no more interesting birds to look at, because they will, once you start to understand your local gulls, you will just find that it's easier, but it does take that little bit of upfront investment of time. So I thought we would do a little quiz. And what I'm going to ask, and I failed to mention this earlier, is if you would kindly get a pen or pencil and a piece of paper, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with gull identification. Now, it's not a killer quiz, but it's a chance for you. I'm going to give you a lot of clues. I'm going to tell you, because you don't have a full frame of reference for the images I'm showing you, you won't necessarily be able to compare sizes. I'm going to tell you what the size of the gull is, what size class it is. And very often I'll ask you to determine, just say what age is it? Is it a first year, second year, third year adult, if it's a large gull, or first year, second year, or adult medium gull, whatever it might be. And if you happen to recognize the species also, then consider that sort of a bonus. But it's not a killer quiz, as I said. It's just meant to be fun, meant to get us to look at gulls. Now, I take photos of the gulls, and I look at my photos, I look back at my own photos because I just like studying them. And so, number one, this is a gull, which is a large gull. It's a large gull, and so based on the overall appearance, what age would you say it is? Remember, large gulls have first year, second year, third year, or basically adult appearance. What would you say? How would you classify this gull here? And if you know what the species is, then also put that down. Note that this bird has pink legs. It has a yellow bill with a red dot below it, and the eye is clear, and it looks like the skin around the eye is like an orangey yellow. That can be important. Number one. Number two, this is a medium-sized gull. It's a medium-sized gull. I'm seeing, so what would you say is the age? If it's medium-sized, remember, first year, second year, or adult, essentially in appearance. I'm seeing overall a lot of gray on it, like very extensive gray on the upper parts. And it looks like it has an all-white tail. It's hard to see though. Remember, things are variable, but I'm seeing brown or very dark slaty smudging kind of away from the wingtips, kind of further up along the wing and on the rear of the wing. The eye looks dusky, and I see quite a thick amount of black near the tip of the bill, but the very tip is pale. All right, this here, number three, this is a large gull. So it's a large gull, so it could be, is it first year, second year, third year, or adult? I'm seeing that the upper parts are very dark on this bird. Hard to tell, to be sure, but to me, it looks like the eye is darkish. It doesn't look like clear. I'm seeing the bill is yellow. There's clearly some red at the kind of below the bill there, near the tip. Gull number four. This is a medium-sized gull. So would you say in appearance is first year, second year, or adult? It's hard to see the tail. I see the eye looks a little bit dusky. The bill looks kind of yellowish. The tip is clear on the bill. There's darkness away from the wingtips on top of the wing, but extensively looks gray. All right. Gull number five. This is a small gull. Okay, so remember, small gulls take the first year or basically an adult. Sometimes you can tell when they're in an actual second year because there might be a little bit of a trace black in the tail or on the wings, but I'm seeing basically a clear, looks like a clear white tail. I don't see any kind of smudging on top of the wings, really away from the very trailing edge of the wing tips themselves. And what is the species? All right, number six. Those of you who are very, very keen might remember this image because I've already shown it. This is a large gull. Okay, and you see that, I'm helping you here because you see that this bird is larger than the ones around it, which look to be ring-billed gulls with yellow legs as adults, or most of those are adults. This one is definitely taller and bigger. It has a lot of gray on it on the back. It has not just in the scapulars over here, but a lot down here. The eye is definitely clear. It has quite a bit of pale on the base, definitely a pale tip, but a lot of gray here. So what would you say? Would you say first year, second year, third year, adult? And what's the species? And remember, we're also following how common these birds are. So think of the likelihood of the species. Okay. Number seven. All right. Well, I don't know if I have to tell you what the size class of the gull in the foreground is. That's the bird we're interested in. But I'll say it's a medium-sized gull. What is the age of this bird in the foreground as a medium-sized gull? And last but not least, this looks hard. I've shown you this image already, but basically, how many species are there in this image? How many species are there? Remember all the changes that happen with age. I would say look at overall size. Are there different size classes of gulls? I'll tell you that all the gulls in this image are large gulls. So they are all 4-year gulls. I'm not asking you for ages, I'm just asking for number of species. But there's a very small number of species in this image. But you'll see gross differences in size among some of them. So how many species? And we will review your answers. Now don't sweat it because this is meant to be fun. And we'll review answers to our questions here. Number 1. I said it was a large gull, so it's what we call a 4-year gull. And would you say it's 1st year, 2nd year, 3rd year, or adult? And if you know the species, that's great. That's a bonus. This is an adult, and it is a herring gull. All right, number 2. Adult herring gulls, by the way, pink legs as adults. Orange, yellow orbital, or the skin around the eye, the eye ring, typical. This here, I said it was a 2nd-year bird, or no, sorry, it was a 3-year bird. I gave away the answer already. It's a 2nd-year ring-billed gull. So bravo to you if you got this. Darkish eye, still some smudginess coming away from the wingtips onto the gray part of the wing. Still darkish eye, so it can be variable though. And a lot of black on the wingtip still towards the wingtip. Question or gull number 3. I said it was a large gull. Clearly it has a very dark upper parts. It looks like basically a pure white body. And this is a gull, which is the largest gull in the world, the great black-backed gull. It is an adult bird. I mentioned there's variability in adult gulls. A lot of adult gulls can get a lot of gray on the head in the winter, but have a white head in breeding season. Great black-backed gull can have a bit of smudginess on it in the winter time, but it basically keeps an all white head appearance. So it has a very white head even in the winter. And this was photographed in the winter. Okay, gull number 4. I said it was a medium-sized gull. Keeping in mind what would be the most common medium-sized gull near you. What age would this be? A lot of gray on it, but still some smudginess up higher up on the wing here. And that is a 2nd-year ring-billed gull. It happens to be eating an emerald shiner, which is a little fish with a beautiful emerald color to it. Gull number 5. I said it was a 2-year gull, or a small gull rather. That's what I told you, which means it's a 2-year gull, as we say. And it is an adult Bonaparte's gull. Now, I find just from looking at Bonaparte's gulls that, and I mentioned it already, but you can fairly often see actual birds that are 2 years old, that are 2nd-year birds, even though they should be adults by that point. But very often you will see adults that have basically an all-white tail with a little bit of black, and a spot of black on the wing away from those tips. These are always worth studying. See if you can actually find a 2nd-year bird, but usually beyond that, you can't tell what age it is. It's just an adult. All right, gull number 6, I said was a large gull, and you can tell that because of the context of the ring-billed gulls, which are around it, which are medium gulls. And this is a lot of gray on it, but still quite a bit of brown on the wings. And that's a 3rd-year herring gull. So I'm not tricking you with rare birds here. Just want to point that out. Question number 7, gull number 7, the one in the foreground. You have context for the size. I said it was a medium-sized gull. The gull in the back is a ring-billed gull, and the gull in the front is also a ring-billed gull. It's a 2nd-year ring-billed gull. Notice the difference in the wingtips. Some of 2nd-year birds will have a bit of white apical spotting on the tips of those dark wing feathers, but very often they have essentially just all blackish wingtips here. This one has very little. This one is very little brownish on the wing, but still a bit of a brownish wash here on the wings. And duller legs, duller bill, and darkish eye. And number 8. how many gull species are there in this photograph? I hinted there's not that many species. And the fact is that there are 3 gull species here. And I'll show you what they are just as curiosity. I'm sure you're curious to know which are which. Gull number 1 is the great black-backed gull, the largest gull in the world, stands bigger and taller than the rest. And you see different ages here. In fact, there are first, second, third, and adult birds. The lower right one is a first-year bird. This one here, a little bit of slaty coming on the back here, is a second-year bird. This one here, almost all slaty on the back, but quite a bit of black in the bill, third-year bird, and the other 2 here are adults. There's the other species. Overwhelmingly, we have herring gulls here. Almost all the other gulls in this image are herring gulls, except for 1. And there's different ages. I've put little numbers here with the ages, first, second, third year, and then a lot of adults here as well, which also vary in the amount of gray on their head. And the other species is the lesser black-backed gull. Can you find the lesser black-backed gull? It's dark, very dark on the upper parts, but not as dark as the great black-backed gull. Some of them in Europe are darker, one of the subspecies, but the subspecies we get here in North America is this bird right here. And it is not as dark as the great black-backed gull, clearly darker than a herring gull, yellow legs as an adult, as opposed to pink legs in the great black-backed gull, yellow legs, and it tends to just be shorter than a herring gull. Just to me, seems to just stand shorter. So that is a lesser black-backed gull, definitely possible along the Niagara River corridor and throughout the Northeast during the winter time. So I hope you enjoyed that little quiz and this introduction to gull identification, some of the notions of how do you start looking at gulls hopefully without being intimidated. I do want to simply give some credits to our contributing photographers. Most of the photographs in this presentation were mine, but I have some very valuable contributions from Ryan Griffiths and Natalie Robertson. And just to flash those book titles for you, if you can find these books, they are becoming as rare as hen's teeth because they're both out of print. This Bird, Identify Yourself by Bill Thompson III. Try and find it if you can. It's great for gulls and so much else. And this book, The Complete Birder, A Guide to Better Birding by Jack Connor. Both of these books are great. And I do want to make a shout out though, as well, to the Ontario Field Ornithologists. If you want one online hub, which will describe to you, which will tell you what are all the gull species you can expect in Ontario. And this also applies to New York State and to a good part of northeastern North America. If you go to ofo.ca, and in the little upper search bar here, if you type in gull watching guide, you can find the link to this page. Fantastic article by Ron Pittaway and Gene Iron, which describes all of the gull species you can expect, and in terms of the seasonality, like when is the best time to see them, how common are they, or rare. This is a great resource. So you get species accounts for all the species you can expect in the area, as well as a great listing of some of the hot spots you can expect, especially along the Niagara River. There's a great description of the places you want to check out to look for gulls. Another great resource is on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, the North American Gulls group, a great place to just get to be a member of the group and just have the photos come into your feed and just get used to looking at gulls and looking for subtleties and differences. And it's a great way to just become one with the gulls. So encourage you all, even if you can't get to a gull watching hotspot, just take the time to look at the gulls near you. Start, if you must, with a lowly ring-billed gull here. Really, it is fascinating to look at, and will fill the lulls in your birding season, because there often just are gulls around, if nothing else. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you to Birds on the Niagara for inviting me. And I suppose if there's any questions, Amanda.
There are. Hi, thank you so much. That was hilarious. I laughed out loud a few times for sure. And who doesn't like a good quiz? That was great. I may have done better than I thought I would.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did great.
So among a whole bunch of thank you messages, there's also a few really good questions here. Okay. The first one is from Dave. Surprised it takes 4 years for a gull to reach its final coloration. How long does it take for a gull to reach reproductive maturity?
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
So for large gulls, large gulls take basically 4 years. So if they're, a ring-billed gull, it's medium, so it's 3 years. So yeah, it depends on the age. But if you're taking the case of a herring gull can basically, when it reaches adult, 4 years, it should be of reproductive age once it's reached adulthood. Now, whether it's able to pair up or find a suitable mate, that's a different question. But it should be reproductive age by that point. In many cases, there are many instances of birds that are maybe 1 year less than the expected age of adulthood that are seen to be paired up. You might have a bird that's a third year parent gull paired up with an adult. I'm not sure. I haven't really followed all those cases to see if they have actually had young, but it's possible. I don't see why they wouldn't necessarily be sexually mature, but it does take up till near adulthood, let's say, near the adult appearance for the bird to try to pair up and try to mate. But I've definitely seen this where, I had this case of canoeing in the interior of Algonquin Provincial Park, and where herring gulls are the only expected breeding gull species. And I happened to be canoeing near an island with a herring gull colony. And herring gulls will sometimes come and do the strange, well, it's not strange for them. They will defend their colony. Even if you're just near it, you don't even look like you're necessarily going to the nesting island. And I did not intend to disturb their island, but they will come and fly over you and they will poop on you. They will try to poop on you to discourage you from going near the nesting island. And I was going in the general vicinity of this little island with a herring gull colony and 2 third-year herring gulls that seemed to be behaving like a pair. The other adults didn't even come near me. These 2 third-year birds, the plumage, came towards me and over me and tried to do the poop and stoop thing, kind of diving towards me, pooping. I thought, that's very interesting. They shouldn't be breeding, like they shouldn't even have young, but I wonder if they do, or if it's just, they're paired up and they're just kind of in a reproductive mindset where they want to form part of the colony defense mechanism and want to where they're already in that mindset. So I found that very interesting. So I'm not able to verify whether they could have already had young, but they were certainly behaving as a couple and they were both in third year. So I would say generally whether they can breed, I expect it's quite possible reproductively that they can, but just generally it's not seen, they're not seen to be doing that, to be actually breeding yet.
So did they succeed? Did they deter you?
Well, I took that as a fair warning that, okay, I'm not getting any closer because I certainly don't want a mob of adult and third year herring gulls coming after me. But that is a great question. I would say I'll have to look up deeper into the literature because I'm sure there are actual instances of successful reproduction. I just have a strong hunch about it. But to be totally perfectly honest, I'm not sure if there have been cases of confirmed successful reproduction in those subadult birds.
Great. Okay, we have 3 more good questions here. Dave again says, amazing how the gull's legs are often completely hidden when they're in flight. Any comments on that?
Well, great question, a great comment. I don't know if I can comment really constructively on it. Yeah, they often seem hidden. I suppose that's because for a comfort, as a comfort mechanism to keep their feet warm if it's cold out. It can make it challenging if you're photographing them or trying to look at what color the legs are, what species they might be as an adult. I don't think I can comment too well on that, other than I suspect it's a way of keeping their just feet out of the wind.
Okay, and then what is the best thing to say to families at the beach who are feeding gulls chips and fries and etc.?
Yeah. Great question. I've seen this. In fact, just last weekend, I was out photographing gulls and people came along and I saw people bringing loaves of bread just coming into a park and think, chips and such. Gulls are really, as we would say, cosmopolitan in their tastes. They really eat anything. I know that certain items for waterfowl, like ducks specifically, and geese and swans, are detrimental to the development of young birds, probably because of nutrient deficiencies in certain foods like bread that don't give them the full amount of nutrients they need as they're growing their bones, as their bones are growing, developing. I think feeding gulls anything in a park tends to keep them hanging around more because they're just expecting to be fed. To be totally honest with you, in terms of gulls specifically, I'm not sure that those specific foods they're shown to be bad for gulls specifically. Gulls that are flying out in parks, very often they're out of breeding season. You'll have large groups of gulls coming into those places feeding. They're basically looking for anything they can eat. I don't know. I don't know that I can really comment on whether that food is bad for them. All I can really say is that repeated feeding of gulls is what keeps them coming back to the same locations. So I would suggest that there's probably better things for gulls to eat than being fed, let's say, chips or breads exclusively. But generally, they're scavengers. They're looking for whatever they can eat. And they seem to eat a lot of foods, a lot of just anything that is available. So I would just be merely speculating, I'm afraid, to say that I should say anything. I think generally you may say that you may not like to feed the gulls because it'll just keep coming back if they happen to be a nuisance in terms of, defecating or whatever that might be. But yeah, I don't know if I have anything really to add on that. I think I would want to go back to the literature and see what, if anyone has anything to say about that.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And one more really good question. Are males and females the same across all species of gulls?
Great question. Mm-hmm. Excellent question. And I did not mention this, but essentially in plumage, gulls are the same, males and females. However, there can be size differences, with males being larger than females. Sometimes it's almost imperceptible. And I think it will vary with species as well, with probably less of the all ones. I'm not totally sure on that, but certainly it's quite a big difference in size. And also, not only in size, but also in build. Like the head of a male can look more severe, and just in proportions, it can look more severe than a female. A great time to see that difference is in March, later February and in March, when they start pairing up. You'll see gulls that are kind of doing a long call display with each other as they're courting, and distinguishing them from other couples as they're kind of squabbling. If you see birds that are acting as a pair, this is a fun thing to do. Look at them if they're acting, spreading little rituals with their head bobbing and such. And try and see if you see one that clearly looks bigger than the other. I would wager that that's the male. So differences can be subtle, but that's one of the types of variability you can have when you're looking at gulls.
That's very neat. Okay, I have one question. Maybe you get this all the time. Do you have a favorite gull?
Oh my goodness, do I have a favorite gull? I have a favorite gull every week. I mean, I have a different gull every week.
So yes, many.
Do I have a favorite gull? It's sometimes I would say it's the gull that I haven't seen yet, or that I kind of need to see. I would say, I definitely have like a top 10. I would say among the most beautiful, there's a gull called the Mediterranean gull, which breeds, actually, despite the name, it's quite extensively breeding in Europe, but very sporadic in its distribution. As an adult, spectacular black head and orange bill and pure white wingtips. It's just, the combination is just, it's just kind of mind blowing when you see it. And I've seen them, but not very well, when I've been in along the Thames River in east of London, south end by the sea, and I've seen them in Spain. But I've never seen a nice adult in breeding plumage up close, and it's definitely a looker, the Mediterranean gull.
One day, I'm gonna have to look that up for sure. Thank you for humoring me. Okay, well, I think there's no more questions, so I'll just go through a few things that I have already put in the chat, but there'll be a little survey for Birds on the Niagara, just to say what you liked, what you didn't like, what really helps us plan for next year. So if you want to fill that out, that'd be great. Also, there are space for 2 walks tomorrow still. It's too late to register online, but if you would like to email me, I can get you into those. There's still a few spots for them, and they will be looking at gulls. So if you want to practice everything that Justin has told you today, you can register for those. And then there's also 2 on Sunday, and you can still register for those online until midnight tonight. Also, I just want to thank TD, because without them, this Canadian side of it, I mean, this is for everyone, obviously, but I, from Birds Canada, could not have worked on this festival. So, and it's so important. There's so many great conservation talks about the Niagara region and in general. So check it out, register, and yes, thanks for TD for supporting this festival so greatly. And I think that is all that I have to say for now, but if you haven't registered, go to check out Birds on the Niagara, just type that into Google and it should pop up. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival and some other talks. And thank you so much, Justin, for the talk. There's so many thanks in the chat, so I think everyone really enjoyed it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
All right, bye everyone.
Bye everyone.